Joining us now, MSNBC legal correspondent Lisa Rubin, also NBC's Vaughn Hilliard from West Palm Beach, Florida, and Mimi Rocha, district attorney for Westchester County in New York and former federal prosecutor. So, Lisa, what exactly do we know about how Judge Merchan reached his decision?
Well, Jose, we don't know that much about what factors went into this decision, in part because Judge Merchan left us only a one-page guide to his thinking. But I can tell you substantively what he has decided. He will hear a motion to dismiss the entire indictment from Trump's lawyers, and he will receive that brief on December 2nd. That's 18 days before Todd Blanche and his colleagues proposed submitting a brief to Judge Merchan. They really wanted this briefing schedule on the motion to dismiss potentially to bleed into former President and President-elect Trump's new term in the Oval Office, because at that point he would be sitting President Trump, and the constitutional issues that could underlie there being an existing case against him might be very different in terms of how courts weigh those factors once he's back in the Oval Office. So here, Judge Merchan telling Trump's lawyers, put in your brief by December 2nd. He's telling the DA, I will take your opposition on December 9th. That is the same day that the DA's office originally proposed to oppose it. He is not allowing reply briefs, which means he is seemingly preparing to issue a decision, perhaps sometime before the holidays. And in calling off the sentencing, Jose, the other thing that comes to my attention is he's saying, I'm calling off the sentencing only to the extent that it was scheduled for next week. What he's not doing is saying the sentencing is postponed indefinitely. Only I'm calling off the November 26th date. What does that mean to me? That means we could get a ruling from Judge Merchan both on the motion to dismiss and the underlying motion to set aside the verdict. I can see a world in which Judge Merchan says, not only am I not going to dismiss the indictment, but I believe the conviction should stand, and I am either prepared to postpone the sentencing until Trump is no longer president after his next term, or I may even be prepared to sentence him now to something like time served and excuse him from having to attend in person, Jose.
Mimi, what's your reaction to this? And, you know, as Lisa was saying, it's really just a one-page statement, but what does that statement tell you?
Well, I think Lisa's got it exactly right. You know, there's the judge is doing exactly, frankly, what one would expect a reasonable judge to do in this situation, which is to say we have to go forward with briefing on this very important legal issue about, you know, whether or not he can proceed with the sentencing. And whether, you know, the verdict should stand. I think the judge, you know, then, as Lisa laid out so thoughtfully, has options in terms of going. Look, I'm assuming the judge will find that the verdict will stand and that sentencing should be proceeded with either after Trump is done being president again, or immediately, and it'll be some sentence that is able to be reconciled with him being president. I say that not because I'm, you know, predicting what the judge would do, but just that seems like the reasonable outcome in this case. And so, I think, once again, it's a small step, but it is a step of the system continuing to function and work as best it can under these extraordinary circumstances. And we can't lose sight of the fact that whatever happens, he was found guilty by a jury of essentially his peers, of regular people. And at the end of the day, as a prosecutor, I look at that as the most important part of this process.
I want to bring in MSNBC legal analyst Catherine Christian, former Manhattan Assistant District Attorney. Catherine, good morning. So your thoughts first on what this is. And, you know, Mimi and Lisa were talking about the possible outcomes or decisions that Merchan could make. What do you see here?
I think, and this is reading tea leaves, but I think if Judge Merchan was going to set aside the verdict, he would have done so already. That he is allowing the defense to file a motion to dismiss, and under New York law, that's considered it's called a Clayton motion, a motion to dismiss in the interest of justice, because the facts and circumstances cry out that this case should be dismissed. I don't think Judge Merchan will do that. I think he is being courteous and careful in allowing the defense to file their motion, allowing the prosecutors, the people in the state, we're called the people, not the government, to respond. It was noted that he said no replies will be allowed after. So defense files, prosecution files, that's it, and he'll make a decision. So, and as Lisa said, and his decision could be not dismissing the indictment, not set aside the verdict. I'm going to sentence President-elect Trump, time served, which means no jail, no probation, and then goodbye, go talk to the appellate courts.
So, and I'm just wondering, Catherine, what were his options before Donald Trump became president-elect and will in January be president, in the sense of what are the possible things that Merchan could have sentenced Trump to if it weren't such an unusual case?
If Donald Trump did not win, he would just be citizen Trump, and the sentencing would go on next week. And the judge could sentence him anywhere from nothing up to 4 years. There are 34 counts. They're all the same count, falsifying business records in the first degree. It can't be consecutive, meaning it can't be 4 years plus 4 years plus 4 years. So those would be the options: probation, a conditional discharge, the condition being you have to pay a fine, or a sentence of imprisonment. That is off the table now because we now have President-elect Trump.
Vaughn, what are you hearing from President-elect Trump's team this morning?
So far, nothing in these first few minutes since his decision came down. But I think that this is, as Catherine was just suggesting, right, 3 weeks ago, it was the stakes of this election were so high because instead of Todd Blanche and Emile Bove being concerned or too highly concerned about their client, the defendant Trump, potentially being sentenced next week just before Thanksgiving to jail time, they have been promised to be nominated to be the number 2 and number 3 position holders within the Department of Justice in his administration come January of 2025. And so I think that there is a lot at stake still here, as everybody was just outlining, for Donald Trump and his legal team, especially with January 20th inauguration on the horizon. Of course, there's a question if Judge Merchan were to indefinitely postpone the sentencing after Donald Trump's prison or after his presidential term, meaning that a sentence wouldn't take place more likely until 2029 or later, it would effectively leave a cloud over the course of his presidency. We should note, of course, just 2 weeks ago, he had seemingly in jest suggested that he would not run for president again. But I think for Donald Trump and his legal team, they effectively were able to run out the clock, understanding that the Supreme Court's immunity decision was paramount to their ability to doing so. And they're now here at a point in time where they're going to have their motion to dismiss and the potential here that they could get a sentence that is just time served, and potentially Donald Trump enters the White House on January 20th with this case while still having been found guilty and being a convicted felon, at least knowing that the case and the potential consequences and repercussions of that guilty conviction being behind him.
I'm just wondering, Lisa, I mean, if that is, for example, the case, if you were to be found guilty, as he was, but I mean, he'd be entering, as Vaughn says, entering the White House as a convicted felon. I mean, that changes so many things.
It certainly does, Jose, in the public imagination. But of course, Trump had been convicted on 34 felony counts before the election. And the fact that he hadn't been sentenced yet, and that's really the only remaining step here, I'm not sure how much that changes. The one thing I would caution everybody is that while Merchan may be setting this up so that he can proceed to a sentencing, there is an argument that former and future President Trump's lawyers have about how to avoid sentencing. And they still have an appeal and the federal appeals court with respect to their trying to move this case back to federal court on the ground that Trump is a former federal officer. And of course, he will be a federal officer again, and that they have federal defenses to articulate. They tried that a couple of months ago in the federal courts here in Manhattan, and they were rejected by a judge. But they've got an appeal that's still pending. The DA's brief in that appeal is due in mid-January. And so if there are signs that Judge Merchan is going to proceed to sentencing, watch for them to rush to that federal court and ask for immediate relief, because the federal statute essentially says if you are trying to remove a state criminal case, you cannot proceed to sentencing. And that is what former and future President Trump's lawyers are counting on in terms of trying to make an argument up through the federal appeal system, potentially up through the Supreme Court, Jose.
And you're saying mid-January by that decision? That would be, and is it before the 20th?
Not mid-January before the decision, mid-January in terms of when the Manhattan DA's brief is due.
Right.
And so if Judge Merchan is trying to move to a decision on sentencing or indicates he's willing to do so before the inauguration, before that brief, count on the Trump lawyers to rush to the Second Circuit. That's the U.S. Court of Appeals that oversees Manhattan and New York, Vermont, Connecticut, and make an argument that he can't proceed to sentencing while that appeal is still pending, because that federal statute says if you are trying to move it to federal court on the grounds that you are a former or future president and you've got some federal defenses in your back pocket, it's unlawful to proceed to sentencing. That's something that they are hoping to be able to articulate to a federal appeals court sometime soon, Jose.
All right, let's start with Russ Vought. Russ Vought, who my colleague at the Washington Post, Jeff Stein, has, I believe it's on Twitter, just pointed out all these things about Russ Vought, notably asserted presidential authorities to unilaterally claw back spending without Congress, said, quote, "We are living in a post-constitutional time." Aggressive proponent of using Schedule F to strip protections from much of the federal workforce. And you can see the rest there on the screen. But are you concerned about Vaught's ties to Project 2025?
Yeah, we said it all along, that this was Donald Trump's 2025. He tried to and lied. He does that often. He's still a con man, even though he's the president-elect. He said he had nothing to do with it. Yet you see Voight, as you will see others, who were instrumental in putting Project 2025 together, being a part of his administration. Again, Jonathan, because they were there before. And that's why it is so dangerous now. They were there before, but they had some guardrails, and now they think that they figured out how to get rid of those guardrails so that they can empower Donald Trump so that he is not like a president of the United States, but they would like him to be like a Vladimir Putin.
Mm-hmm. One of the things I didn't read that my Jeff Stein put it there, up there, put it back up on the screen, that Russ Vought has crafted plans for Trump to deploy the military to quash civil unrest and seize more control over the Justice Department. Deploying the military to quash civil unrest, that's something that Pete Hegseth, thanks to Jonathan Chait at The Atlantic, having read, all of his books, that's something that the defense secretary pick that Trump has given us, Pete Hegseth, he's down for that too. How concerned are you that people are being put in place who are going to do things that are unconstitutional, but also un-American?
Well, that's because those individuals that Donald Trump chooses, he doesn't want those that pledge themselves to the United States of America. He wants those that pledge themselves to Donald J. Trump. And that's where the danger really goes in. He wants loyalists. He's picked no one really based upon their experience. The only thing that he looks at when they give his resume is, will you be loyal to me? Mm-hmm. And so you have to question what anybody that he's put in place, because everyone that he's put in place has had a role previously with him. And as he says, he doesn't hide it. He says the most important thing to him and whoever he picks is loyalty, not to the United States of America, but to Donald Trump. And that's a dangerous situation. Why? Who else looks to want to have people that's loyal? Does Vladimir Putin like people to be loyal to him? You know what happens to them? If they don't go with him, he do go after them. In fact, many of them fall out of windows at times.
I was about to say, off balconies and things.
Orban, who visited him down in Mar-a-Lago, go check out what's happening there. His best friend who he had a bromance with, Kim Jong-un. What happens in North Korea? These are the people that he's associated himself with, and this is what he admires. I gotta
get you on two more things. One, we played the long clip of Nikki Haley talking smack about Tulsi Gabbard. Did Nikki Haley say anything wrong are untrue about Tulsi Gabbard?
She said exactly right. That's why I am puzzled. She endorsed Donald Trump. And as you've correctly stated, she helped put him there because she could have taken the position that everyone that was close to Donald Trump that had pledged allegiance to the United States, General Kelly, General Milley, they took umbrage with Donald Trump, the former vice president, his former defense secretary. All of them did not endorse Donald Trump in this last election. Nikki Haley could have done the same thing. So to talk about it now when it's too late seems to me a little bit hypocritical.
And let me have you put on your House Financial Services Committee hat. Your thoughts on Scott Bessent being chosen by Trump as his choice for Treasury Secretary?
Unfortunately, when you look at this and you compare some of these other places, on paper, he would seem as though he is a more reasonable person. But he would then have to carry out, and will he stand up to Donald Trump when Donald Trump says he's going to put 10% tariffs on all of our allies and everyone else, and almost 70% tariffs on China? And what will that do with reference to inflation and other things? Is he going to carry out that agenda? Or is he going to come to something that is much more reasonable? Because if you talk to any economist, conservative or liberal, they will tell you that what he, has said, Donald Trump, is inflationary. And so what will this guy do? Is he going to just follow? Because Donald has said, if you don't do what I tell you to do, he won't last long. He'll be fired. He'll be gone.
Right. One more question for you before I have to let you. What do you think Trump's second term is going to look like for House Democrats?
Well, look, we have now more seats than we had last term. We had 212. We had 213 now. We have 3 seats that are yet to be decided. We could be at 215 looking at the numbers right now, which means that the Republicans in the House will only have 1 vote. So they couldn't govern then. They couldn't govern in the 118th Congress. How do you expect them to govern in the 119th Congress? So often in the 118th Congress, the de facto speaker to get anything done was Hakeem Jeffries. So what's going to happen in the 119th Congress? They will not function. It's going to take them to working with us if they want to get anything done. And I think that what I can guarantee you, Jonathan, we will be taking it straight to the American people so that they can look and evaluate what's going on in their lives as a result of the election of Donald J. Trump and the election by keeping the House in the majority of the Republicans.
See what I'm doing here?
Eating popcorn.
Come on. Exactly it. Congressman Gregory Meeks, the great state of New York, thank you very much for coming to the last
Good to be
word.
with you.
This time, he's hawking a line of branded acoustic and electric guitars that, along with his signature, come with a price tag of more than $10,000. Just add it to the pile of Bibles, sneakers, watches, digital trading cards, and other things Trump has recently been convincing all of his easy marks to shell out for. This, of course, is nothing new for Trump. He has a long history of grifting. One of his biggest scams was Trump University. Do you remember that one?
At Trump University, we teach success. That's what it's all about, success. It's going to happen to you. Honestly, if you don't learn from them, if you don't learn from me, if you don't learn from the people that we're going to be putting forward, and these are all people that are handpicked by me, then you're just not going to make it in terms of the world of success. I think the biggest step towards success is going to be sign up at Trump University.
Yep. Just a year after The Apprentice appeared on televisions across the country, Trump opened the doors to his sham university, basically promising that if you signed up for his courses, which could run as much as $35,000, you too could learn to be rich just like him. And a lot of people took the bait. Thousands upon thousands of people bought into the scam across multiple states. In 2013, New York Attorney General Eric Schneiderman filed a civil lawsuit against Trump. Other states were weighing whether to join the lawsuit, including Florida, which was second among states with people buying into the con. Florida's Attorney General at that time was Pam Bondi. Trump's latest pick to become U.S. Attorney General following Matt Gaetz' disastrous short run for the position. Well, just 4 days after reports surfaced that Florida could join in the lawsuit, a donation of $25,000 was made from the Donald Trump Foundation to a PAC supporting Bondi's 2014 reelection bid. That must have just been a coincidence, right? First off, I should add that it is highly illegal for a foundation to make political contributions, which this clearly was. And wouldn't you know it? A few weeks later, Bondi's office announced that it would not take any legal action against Trump University. Who could have guessed that? And ever since then, Bondi has been by Trump's side. In fact, she was floated as Attorney General in his first administration after Trump fired then AG Jefferson Sessions. She served on Trump's legal team during his first impeachment trial in 2020, though her performance was, let's just say, less than stellar.
He remained on the board until April of 2019.
Oh, honey. You wouldn't know it from that, but she has made countless appearances on TV, especially on Fox, showing her loyalty, including pushing his big lie following the 2020 election.
We do have evidence of cheating, and I'll talk about that in a minute, but we are still on the ground in Pennsylvania. I'm here right now, and we are not going anywhere until they declare that we won Pennsylvania.
Yeah, no. Trump did not win Pennsylvania in 2020. She also made sure to be by his side during his criminal trials here in New York City.
Listen, all the rights here, I'm a prosecutor, former prosecutor. Yeah, all the rights here go to the defendant because it's his liberty at stake, and that has not been happening in this courtroom. This case should have never, ever been brought.
One might say that it is highly dubious ethically to bring one of one's own lawyers in to lead the Department of Justice, but Trump has already announced 2 of his other lawyers to top DOJ positions. So, what's one more? And sadly, given some of Trump's other cabinet picks, she may easily sail through simply because, to our knowledge, she has not faced any allegation of sexual misconduct, because that apparently is where the bar is being set. Joining me now is Tristan Snell, former Assistant Attorney General for New York State, who prosecuted Trump University, and Ruth Ben-Ghiat, history professor at New York University. Thank you both for being here. Tristan, I do want to go to you. The Trump University scam was the start to what turned into the Pam Bondi scandal at the time. Talk a little bit about the Trump University, what it was, what it did, why it wound up being dissolved.
The whole thing was a scam. It was basically a wealth creation seminar bait and switch scheme wrapped in the gold veneer of the Trump brand. The clip that you played a few minutes ago had one of the big lies in there, saying that Trump had handpicked all of the instructors. He never met any of them, never had anything to do with any of them. So the whole thing, you could go on, but they promised that people would learn everything they needed to know to invest in real estate, and then they never actually delivered on any of it.
Yeah. And didn't it, it also, in a sense, led to the second trial that Donald Trump faced in New York, which was his charity being delisted. That's right. Talk a little bit about that, because the actual donation to Pam Bondi's PAC came from his charity.
That's right. So it was both the source of the Bondi scandal, and then it led to the Trump Foundation. My colleagues in the Charities Bureau at the time at the New York Attorney General's office then brought that case, focusing on that illegality and others and other fraud that occurred, and then shut down the foundation and managed to get a $2 million victory.
So just so that people understand kind of where we are in terms of the corruption aspect of it, and that Letitia James, who then took over the as U.S. as Attorney General here in the state of New York, she wasn't just fishing after Trump. I mean, there were things that led to her going after Donald Trump's companies and his charities.
Trump was already a recidivist before Letitia James came into office. The notion that she was somehow looking for targeting Trump, that's crazy. It's just like, okay, we have a list of all of the people who have been criming, and he's on it. Maybe we should keep on looking into those people who have been criming.
Yeah. Ruth, I want to talk about the reason I wanted to start here is because, corruption is sort of the coin of the realm in autocratic governments. We talked about kakistocracy, one of my favorite words. And it's not just government by the worst people, but people who are willing to do corruption. Pam Bondi, as a lobbyist, she had clients, she had big clients, Amazon, GM, Uber, Qatar, the nation of Qatar. She comes in with a history, and that history does include a very dubious tie to Donald Trump. What do you make of the idea of her being the highest law enforcement officer in the country?
I mean, she has the quality that he wants far more than expertise or professionalism. She is loyal. And this autocratic models of loyalty can have no bounds. You have to do whatever the leader asks you to do. And she's worked long and hard to get to this nomination. She's been a true believer, forever. She also, like in 2016 at the Republican National Convention, people started chanting, "Lock her up," about Clinton. And she said, "Yes, lock her up. I love that." And so she has been stumping for him. She showed up at the criminal trial. She's done all the loyalty performances, and he watches who comes out in support of him at his moments of duress. And he's had many because of his own corruption, the impeachments, et cetera. And she's been there every time. So this is the reward. And he knows he can count on her to do whatever he asks her to do. So he is to call William Barr my attorney general. This will be double the case now if she becomes the attorney general. She'll certainly be his attorney general.
Right. I mean, and Donald Trump has always said he wants his Roy Cohn. He's now stacking the DOJ with Roy Cohns. Let me just read a Washington Post headline. Cassidy Hutchinson, if you'll recall, she was the star witness in the January 6th hearings, House hearings. She says that Trump figures sought to influence her testimony, and she names Pam Bondi. Pam Bondi, Florida's former attorney general, even let Hutchinson know one night in March that she had been the topic of conversation during a dinner with Trump himself, in which a job working with a Republican heavyweight was discussed. Hutchinson testified, "Pam texted me that night and said something to the effect of, Susie, Matt Schlapp and I had dinner with POTUS at Mar-a-Lago tonight. Call Matt next week. He has a job for you that we all think you'd be great at, that we think you would be great in. You are the best. Keep up the good work. Love and miss you." So that is on the record, things that she allegedly did as sort of muscle Cassidy Hutchinson. And now let you listen to, in 2023, what she said she would like to do to people in the Department of Justice.
When Republicans take back the White House, and we will, you know what's going to happen? The Department of Justice, the prosecutors will be prosecuted, the bad ones. The investigators will be investigated, because the deep state, last term for President Trump, they were hiding in the shadows. But now they have a spotlight on them, and they can all be investigated.
Ruth Ben-Ghiat, that is on the menu now, to go after people who investigated Donald Trump for various alleged crimes.
Investigating the investigators is a classic of authoritarianism, because what the leader wants more than anything is to be safe, to feel untouchable. And so anybody, prosecutors, judges, investigative journalists, anybody who has the facts and the empirical proof to harm them have to be investigated themselves. And so the wheel of justice turns into, I call this the upside down world of authoritarianism. And many of the nominations, like the director of national intelligence, who may compromise our national security, the Health and Human Services, nomination who would spread disease because he doesn't believe in vaccines. And so the AG who would have investigators investigated. This is classic authoritarian dynamics.
Yeah.
Joining me now is Michael Froman, the president of the Council on Foreign Relations and former U.S. Trade Representative. Michael, it's great to see you. Thank you very much for being with us. So Putin seems to be saber-rattling, since the U.S. assessment is that he's not going to carry out a nuclear threat. His nuclear posture was long planned. They just formalized it and announced it this week. especially not in anticipation of a more accommodating American president about to take office in the person of Donald Trump.
I think that's right, Andrea. I think clearly he wanted to do something in response to President Biden's decision to allow ATACMS to be used to target territory within Russia. But he is saber rattled before. And I think one thing the Ukrainians have done by going into Kursk is to demonstrate that, in fact, you can attack a nuclear power and they will still be constrained by the pressure of the world not to escalate to use nuclear weapons.
So are his tactics, the fear tactics, though, going to rattle the NATO allies, the Balkan states certainly in NATO, or is it designed to improve his leverage against Ukraine in what is now expected by most people to be a negotiation that's going to take place next year?
I think both sides, both Russia and Ukraine, are using this time to try and create the best possible situation on the ground before, as you alluded to, the upcoming likely negotiations. So Ukraine using the ATACMS and taking action that they can take right now to hold and hold territory within Ukraine and perhaps push the Russians back where possible. Russia trying to make incremental improvements in eastern Ukraine and to repel the Ukrainians from the Kursk region using North Korean troops as well. So there is an escalation, including around attacking Ukraine's energy infrastructure, and all in anticipation of that negotiation. I don't think any of this is fundamentally game-changing. I don't think the ATACMS fundamentally change the situation on the ground, nor do Putin's attacks on Ukraine and the energy infrastructure. There's just will continue to be damage done until both sides can sit down and reach a negotiated solution.
Well, what could be game-changing are 10,000 North Korean troops. Should the U.S. and NATO be concerned about the first introduction of Asian troops on a European battlefield and the degree that Kim Jong-un is helping his ally Putin and replenish his troops? And also, there's a two-way street here. The degree to which Putin is helping Kim Jong-un transform or modernize his missile.
Well, it's exactly right. I mean, the combination of Iran, North Korea, and China coming to the aid of Russia in its attack on Ukraine really demonstrates a new dynamic that links together the Indo-Pacific theater and the European theater when it comes to security. I think in Europe, I just came back from a trip to NATO and to Finland and Poland to focus on NATO enlargement issues. Certainly the Europeans are increasingly viewing China and its actions, as well as North Korea and Iran, as being a security threat to Europe, and that's changing their perspective on how to deal with China going forward. We don't know yet what the North Korean troops really mean for the battlefield, whether they are very good and effective troops or whether they are not. And so we'll have to see what happens when they are, in fact, in combat. The potential, of course, as some have suggested, that the 10,000 is just a down payment on potentially 100,000 troops coming from North Korea, which would allow Putin to avoid having to draft young men from St. Petersburg and Moscow and potentially run into political opposition. That is a very disturbing potential new fact in this conflict. But we have to see how the North Korean troops perform. And in the meantime, I think this is all having the effect of strengthening NATO, strengthening European resolve, and strengthening the transatlantic effort to try and support Ukraine to bring this to a acceptable end.
Well, the acceptable end, though, would be a negotiated end, it seems. Obviously, Volodymyr Zelensky is navigating a very careful balancing act and very aware of what he faces, or what he could potentially face with Donald Trump coming into office. And for the first time, he's actually backed up. There's public polling that, large numbers, a clear majority, plus maybe 2/3 of Ukrainians support a negotiated solution. They are obviously war weary, and it seems to be that the reality has set in that there's going to have to be some trade-offs.
I think that's right. They are war weary. They are prepared, it seems like, or they're preparing themselves to accept the fact that they're not going to achieve their territorial objectives at this time through military means alone. And that leaves the fundamental question of what their security situation is going forward. Zelensky and I think Ukrainians would say it has to be NATO membership. Anything short of NATO membership, any other kinds of security guarantees, the Russians will just poke their way through. And when the West is preoccupied elsewhere, will launch a third offensive into Ukraine. I think on the West side, there's discussion of how do we make a set of security guarantees short of NATO membership as muscular and as credible as possible. And that, I think, is where the negotiation will really come down to, because Ukrainians, I think, are highly skeptical given previous security guarantees they've received, including back in 1994 when they gave up their nuclear weapons. And those security guarantees have not, in fact, provided sufficient security for them.
First, the president-elect has picked billionaire Scott Bessent to be Treasury Secretary. Now, Bessent is one of Trump's top donors. He is also a former hedge fund manager at a firm started by Democratic mega-donor George Soros. But he has since earned Trump world credibility by converting into a MAGA true believer and embracing what the Washington Post calls populist economics. Just a few hours ago, Trump also chose his head of OMB, the Office of Management and Budget, a position of significant influence as far as the president's agenda. In that position, Trump hopes to install the architect of Project 2025, Russell Vought, the man who served the same role during Trump's first term in office. Trump's full embrace of Vought is further confirmation that Trump's proclaimed disinterest in Project 2025 was anything but. And then about an hour and a half ago, Trump made a surprise pick following some heavy lobbying from the Teamsters Union, choosing Republican Congresswoman from Oregon, Lori Chavez DeRemer. She will be his labor secretary. Chavez DeRemer was one of few Republicans to co-sponsor the PRO Act, which protects and strengthens workers' rights to organize. Joining me now to talk this first tranche of appointments is Faz Shakir, senior advisor to Senator Bernie Sanders and founder of the nonprofit More Perfect Union. Faz, thank you for joining me. It has been a flurry of news from Trump world tonight, and I want to kind of just tick through some of these appointments to hear what you have to say. First, let's talk about the Treasury Secretary, just because there was a lot of back and forth about who he was going to pick, whether this was someone Trump could rely on to enact his tariff plan, which has come with a lot of eyebrow raising on the part of a lot of economists. What do you make of someone who was once affiliated with George Soros, once worked for George Soros, played a key role in some of George Soros's investments, now part of the MAGA firmament?
Well, this has been an interesting fight because Elon Musk opposed Scott Bessent. He said he was business as usual and that business as usual would bankrupt the government. It became a major tussle between the Elon Musk wing of the Trump world versus Steve Bannon. Steve Bannon, fresh out of jail, advocated strong. This was his major campaign. He had Bessent come on his show. He said, this is the guy. This is the MAGA movement person. He's going to enact our tariffs. And it became kind of so much of a tussle that Trump then looked to a third person, the head of Apollo, Mark Rowan, who was probably the highest profile person who came to Mar-a-Lago, talked to him. And he went with Bessent. So the MAGA world, Steve Bannon wins this one. And you see in the flurry of all these other things, you could see Trump kind of doling out favors to various factions of his coalition tonight. But Steve Bannon got this one.
So a W on the board for Steve Bannon. And I would assume you feel that this is also a W for Steve Bannon in the fact that Justin Vought, a mastermind is the word that's frequently used in the press to describe his work on Project 2025. Mastermind of Project 2025 being installed at OMB. Now, Vought was there in the first term, but it is quite obvious, especially from the writings in Project 2025 that Russ Vought oversaw, that he has some very clear, very extreme ideas about what to do next. What's your reaction to this one?
Well, with that one, Alex, for those who are frequent watchers of the Alex Wagner Show, will remember that 2 nights ago, you and I were talking about the cuts to Medicaid and to food stamps. And that was in the first Trump administration. It happened. Who executed that? When we saw all of those great protests in Capitol Hill over Medicaid cuts, who was the architect? Mr. Russell Vought. He's back, and he's going to be here for the same thing. If you looked at the last budget that Donald Trump produced, and sent out in 2020, it had massive cuts. I think it was over $1.5 trillion to Medicaid. It had massive cuts, even cut Social Security, food stamps, of course. And so you can assume, looking both at Project 2025, which of course Trump said, oh, no, that's not going to have anything to do with me. Of course it is. And he's now named not only, Vogt, but Stephen Miller, Tom Homan, and Brendan Carr, a number of others who were authors of Project 25 to his administration. But you can assume he's going right at all the things you and I were talking about 2 nights ago, Medicaid, food stamps, the far-right agenda to attack working people.
Yeah, just to put a finer point on that, from the Project 2025 stable, he's named Tom Homan, who is Trump's border czar, John Ratcliffe, his planned nominee for CIA director, Brendan Carr, his selection for the FCC, the Federal Communications Commission, and Pete Hegstra, his selection for ambassador to Canada. Much respect to Canada. The sort of probably most, I'm going to say, unusual pick here, and I'm real eager to hear your thoughts on this, is Lori Chavez-DeRemer for Labor Secretary. She had the endorsement of the Teamsters Union. She was at the RNC, she had a speaking slot at the RNC this summer, but she endorsed the PRO Act. She has been a friend to labor. Again, the Teamsters endorsement. I mean, I know you're familiar with this individual. What do you make of Trump's pick for her as Labor Secretary?
Well, it is a pro-labor pick, and this is a victory for Sean O'Brien, of the head of the Teamsters, who advocated for, spoke at the RNC, as you mentioned, and went in big for this. And Sean O'Brien got opposed by much of the conservative movement, Competitive Enterprise Institute, Grover Norquist Group, all came out against Sean O'Brien's and DeRemer. And Trump went with them, and I think we all know why. He said, hey, I'm going to do something for my friend Sean O'Brien, which is great, in the W, and I hope that we are able to push pro-labor. I mean, the world, the country needs it. However, the hostility that surrounds her is real. You got Elon Musk, you got Russell Vogt, we were just talking about. You've got Wall Street hedge fund guy Scott Bessent. These are not people who are ready to go flying with the pro-labor agenda. So she's got her work cut out for her, but it is at least one voice at a table where she is outgunned by very Wall Street friendly people, who's going to have at least a labor voice. And there's moments where, of course, I think it could be helpful when workers go on strike. I will just note that, in order to support the labor secretary, you also need an NLRB, National Labor Relations Board support. And so who Donald Trump picks for that needs to complement this direction if we're going to carve into being a pro-labor. But it is a decent first step here.
Yeah, I mean, it's already, first of all, it's Friday night, and he has announced 320% of his cabinet in 5 minutes, right? That's chaotic. The actual picks themselves, some of whom we're going to get to a few more in just a second, but the fact that you have a pro-labor candidate at the Department of Labor and Elon Musk advising the president just is all the insight you need to know into how unified this group of people is going to be, and the chaos that is bound to ensue with so many people at odds over such key issues.
MAGA loyalist Marjorie Taylor Greene will lead the House subcommittee for DOGE next year. That is the effort, of course, led by Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy to eliminate government waste, the Department of Government Efficiency. My nightcap is still here. A lot of people are wondering, where's J.D. Vance?
Can I ask you something? So she's leaving. She's not leaving the Congress, right? No. But isn't DOGE just a blue ribbon sort of thing? It's not an official government agency.
It's not official. In fact, they are volunteers. Okay. Because Musk and Ramaswamy being volunteers means they don't have to divest. They don't have to have background checks. They don't have conflicts of interest. They just get to give their recommendations. And let's see what happens.
Yeah. So she can do that. There's no conflict of interest with her working at DOGE and also
my
being a
sweet
government.
Love.
Yes, ma'am.
Welcome to 2024. Conflicts of interest were yesteryear. But for real,
whereas
Elon Musk has been in every Trump family photo next to Donald Trump all day, every day, yesterday, and most likely tomorrow. How does this look for J.D. Vance, who in theory is the VP and the number 2?
How does it look for Don Jr. when you have Elon Musk standing in front of you in a family portrait? I mean,
fair, totally fair.
I don't know. I mean, I will just say that my mom texted me saying, wait a minute, who is the vice president? Is it, and where is, the same question that you're asking, where is J.D. Vance? Because all I'm seeing, she says, is Elon Musk.
Well, one of the great dramas is going to be to watch these two guys and how this plays out. You have arguably the two most powerful guys in the world.
Who's the boss?
I'd like you to ask each one of them. Now, the day Donald doesn't feel like he's the boss, Elon's got a problem.
Yeah.
But, you know, there's so many reasons. You have a theory. I know you're going to say that you think it's going to get along. I think it's going to be like wrestling. Like, they'll fight, they'll get back together, they'll fight. One guy will be a bad guy, another will be a good guy. I mean, but I think the drama between those two guys is going to be one of the big news stories coming up.
I think they find him all to be amusing at this point, the people I've spoken to around Trump, because he'll just say like really outlandish things, and he'll talk about like going to Mars, or why don't we change the defense system? Why aren't we just using drones? Like, he'll just come up with these fantastical ideas, and they're just like, whoa, this guy is brilliant, and they're enjoying being around this guy. I mean, he's the richest man in the world. He gave Trump a ton of money, but he's not the most socially savvy. And the people who tend to survive around Trump, they understand how to survive in Trump world, and that means like giving him his space, recognizing your enemies who are around you, and obviously, like, don't irritate Trump, because like Howard Lutnick, he's the head of the transition. He irritated Trump a lot, and that's why he got Commerce
But
Secretary.
is it different when you have $300 billion?
Yes. Donald Trump has one true love in this world.
Money.
And it's money. Elon Musk has a level of wealth and even power, the likes we have never seen.
But he wouldn't trade place with him. He would not trade place. I still think Trump would rather be Trump than Elon Musk.
And Elon Musk would rather be Elon Musk.
There's your interesting
yes, and so
dynamic.
I actually think they're not breaking up because, Trump marvels at Elon Musk's wealth because there's nothing like it. But my question to you, Steve, is at some point, will any of the conflicts of interest matter, right? So Howard Lutnick is going to be the Commerce Secretary. What's one of the first things he's likely to do? Bring internet, broadband to rural America. And who's going to do it? Starlink.
I don't think so. I mean, I think that your comment at the top of the segment, it was yesterday's issue. Who's going to enforce it? Who's going to decide that conflicts of interest are indeed a conflict? I think that we're sort of beyond that. We elected a president who is rife with conflicts of interest. His dealings with foreign powers, the money that he took during his first term, the operations of his son-in-law, the operations of his businesses. He has a, a social media company that's going to benefit from this. I don't even know where to start anymore.
He never divested right before you were supposed to.
No, he was supposed to.
The last time he never did it, right?
We used to do this if there was a little hint of this. Back in the days when, I don't know, journalists sort of mattered, right?
They still do.
Thank you
Hold
very
on
much.
a minute.
I'm sorry.
When you say that,
yeah.
that is the greatest gift to Steve Bannon, who wants to destroy all journalists.
But
I'm going to kick you right out of here.
The point I would make
is accurate, but I'll let you finish.
When we would get a hint or a whiff of a conflict, it would blow up into a very big deal.
True.
It is just not the case anymore. I don't know why that is. I don't mean to denigrate journalism. I'm a lifelong journalist. I'm a huge supporter of journalism, but I just don't know where and how it matters anymore.
People care about are their problems being solved. Yeah. If my pocketbook, if my bread costs less, and I'm not worried about immigration, and I don't feel crime's bad, but they don't even know what a conflict of interest is.
But I think you're saying something very smart about journalism that has sort of, has been in the zeitgeist, especially this was the streamer, influencer, podcaster election. And Donald Trump knew it, and he went to those folks and he actually energized and animated and electrified a part of the electorate that hadn't been before. Young people, young men, especially young white men on college campuses. Who would have thought that would have been, this election was fought on the margins, won and lost on the margins. And so he electrified that demographic, which I saw it happening in real time as I went to college campuses across the country.
Steph,
but when you look at who he amplifies, those folks, right? The Joe Rogans. He's not trying to go on NBC, ABC, CBS, CNN, MSNBC for interviews. He's going there. Watch who's going to be in the press briefing. See if influencers may be sitting in the front row or in front of actual old school journalists.
There's a different issue. Journalists covered all those conflicts of interest last time.
Yeah.
We're absolutely willing and ready to cover them again. Right. But there's a question to the Biden administration. Because when Joe Biden was running in 2020, he said, elect me, because I'm going to close all these loopholes. Never again will you have a president that can run a business, not disclose his taxes. We're going to, because the problem is all these things that Donald Trump is doing are legally allowed. And you remember when the last administration, they would laugh at us? Yeah. You'd say, Kellyanne Conway, this is unprecedented. This is inappropriate. And they would go, sure, it's inappropriate, but it's not illegal. And in the last 4 years, when we thought
Democrats were in power and they would change the rules. And before you ran for president, you would be legally forced to show your taxes and do all these things. It never happened.
No, and
so now we have Trump 2.0 oligarchy.
Absolutely. And
that's a good one. You can trademark.
You were practicing that one like the black jobs with Michelle Obama.
Right there. That's a hard one to follow. And in fact, if you look at the people who were around Joe Biden, they were some of the worst in terms of conflicts of interest. I mean, basically his entire inner circle was full of former lobbyists that had come
Hold on.
That's
true.
No,
yes.
Steve Ricchetti, Anita Dunn.
They were former lobbyists.
Yeah.
And when they worked in the White House, they had absolutely no real-time conflicts. The conflicts we are talking about with Donald Trump are live right now. Right? Kelly Loeffler right now, what's happening with her company and Truth Social, and she's going to get a post in the White House. I mean, like, you can't even compare the conflicts that have existed in the Biden White House.
And you also can't compare it to Steve's point. And who's going to say something? I mean, it's like...
I think we're going to keep doing it. But I want to ask Donnie a quick question, which has struck me that the 78-year-old candidate Trump ran a younger campaign.
100%.
And the idea of reaching out to younger people, I think that this was a certain... It highlighted a certain sclerosis, if you might, in the Democratic Party. They are older. They acted older. They ran an older campaign.
Too careful.
The things that Don was talking about were fantastic on the part of the Trump campaign, and they were never responded to by Harris.
Look, they understood. Trump, you can say all you want about him negatively. Trump gets media, the culture, the pulse. He just has it's through his body. He understands that. So he had that going in. Also, a lot of young people just related to like the strength and the visceral, particularly young men, that's what they took away. Like I spoke to so many.
It's not the strength; it's fear.
The young people weren't voting out of fear.
There was some fear there from young people because young people are afraid of. They too are afraid of being canceled. They too, sort of pretend or think that they know about the economy when mom and dad are paying the credit card bills and the whatever. But they're afraid that he gets them to believe that, oh my God, the economy is bad.
He's more entertaining.
Or he gets them to believe. And this whole idea.
He's built for this.
Yeah, but listen. This whole idea about free speech, these young people are all on this. They're not getting their news from old folks like us, okay? They're all on this. And what are they doing? Free speech, free speech, free speech, which has nothing to do with a social media platform. But they believe if they cannot go on a social media platform and call you a dirty word, or you a dirty word, or me, or whatever, or be able to say whatever the hell that they want, or objectify women, or whatever, that is somehow free speech, when it is not. And that is what the social media algorithms are pushing, the people who own the social media companies, and Donald Trump as well. They're taking your rights and your freedoms away, and you won't be able to say what you want to say, young guy. You should be the head of the household and not all these women that are taking your jobs.